Kenya will be the next Singapore. Only tough decisions will get us to the Singapore League. If our leaders worked as hard as our citizens, would be the Singapore of Africa. If Singapore made it to the first world, we too can make it. We've heard these lines time and again from our leaders. Apparently, they want Kenya to be like Singapore. Okay then, let's compare. First, the hard numbers. In 2024, Kenya's GDP per capita was about $2,206. Singapore's was roughly $88,500. That's around 40 times higher. Population? Kenya is a nation of 53 to 54 million. Singapore is just over 6 million. Size didn't save us, but smallness didn't limit them.
For the last 1 week, the country has known no peace as political leaders competed over who could shout the loudest about Linda Mama versus Linda Jamii. Fascinating how every politician who found a live microphone rushed to tell their version of the truth, most of it less about healthcare, more about scoring points against former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And when darkness fell, the same politicians sped home, not to miss the evening bulletin, eager to watch how grand their performance had looked in our increasingly reactive political culture. But now the week is over. Then what?
Very good morning and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for your greatest support. Fellow Kenyans, there is something that I would like to talk about here for a few minutes before I play the videos of yesterday's news gang. Let me start by saying this, but I really don't know what is going to happen or what will happen if politicians just decide not to blame anybody and work for Kenyans. Like literally everybody should just mind his or her own business. I was elected as an MP of a certain constituency, of maybe Macharia, of maybe Nyando, of maybe, let's say, just a simple constituency, as a constituency, maybe Eastland, something like that. So what I'm supposed to do, let me focus with the buildings, with the development in my constituency. I was elected as the president. Let me work as a president to oversee what is happening in my country. I was elected as a deputy president. Let me help the president to work. Let us stop this issue of PR. But then who are our leaders? Leaders normally think that whenever they talk negatively about others, that is how they get to be loved or to be respected by others. Or that is how maybe they get to be close to the citizens. But I think it's just a myth, and it's one of the ways that they make themselves fail. I'm saying this because of yesterday's news gang. There are a lot of things that were talked about, and let me say this again, that if there is a single day, if there is a day that these people normally pray that Isifike is normally on Thursday night during the news gang. We normally have Yvon Okwaras, we have got Kaikai, we have got Bonyo, we have got Jamila, and also some Gituku. These guys, whatever they normally talk about, sometimes you sit down and you say that, okay, anyway, these guys have done this research and they know what they are saying. Like, Kaikai was telling the president to stop this issue of buildings.
The construction and launching of the so-called state lodges in Kenya is getting out of hand. By the way, a new state lodge is coming up. Kitui County, which will be hosting the next Macharia Day celebrations on the 20th of this month, will be home to Kenya's latest state lodge. The Kitui State Lodge will be coming just 3 months after the inauguration of another new state lodge in Homa Bay. Like the Kitui State Lodge, the Homa Bay State Lodge was constructed for purposes of hosting presidential receptions that follow national celebrations that were hosted at the Lakeside County. So, on the score of a new state lodge for each national holiday celebration, we are at a 100% efficiency this year. A year ago, Kwale County hosted the Macharia Day celebrations And for that, a state lodge was inaugurated and gazetted as such in April this year by Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen. In the same gazette notice was Bungoma State Lodge, which joined the nearby Kakamega State Lodge in the list of Western Kenya presidential retreats. Back in 2020, Kisii County hosted the Mashujaa Day celebrations, and the then President Uhuru Kenyatta inaugurated the Kisii State Lodge. As of today, the 3rd of October, the 2nd of October, the list of state lodges around the country stands at 11. Alongside Kisii, Kwale, Bungoma, Kakamega, and Homa Bay, we have the Sagana State Lodge, the oldest, the Mount Kenya Colonial Retreat that ironically was contracted as a gift to the Princess Elizabeth, who later became Queen. Then there is the Kisumu State Lodge, the Eldoret State Lodge, a state lodge in Kilifi, a state lodge in Makueni, and coming up shortly, the Kitui State Lodge. Total count, 11 state lodges. Then there was talk of renovating the Takwel State Lodge in West Pokot. This is affordable housing on steroids. And don't close that state lodge list just yet. Listen to this.
Nishamwambia Profesa Kithure Kindiki hapa tayari kwamba ajenge state lodge hapa Meru. Tutakuwa tunakaa hapa, sijui state lodge sasa ati mtalete miraa jioni. Mimi naona hapo kwa maziwa ni mzuri. Hii ya miraa sijui, lakini tutaona. Ndio mimi nikilala hapa tupange mambo ya Meru vizuri.
Well, the role of the yet to be inaugurated Meru State Lodge is clear. Now, if that is done, then the number will go to 12, or is it 13, depending on the next impulse. Now, alongside this 11 designated state lodges, the President of the Republic of Kenya enjoys 3 official residences listed as State House Nairobi, State House Mombasa, and State House Nakuru. But let's talk about this rapid expansion of the state lodges network. As the circumstances of the inauguration show, state lodges serve short-term purposes. They are short-stay facilities for the exclusive use of the president when visiting the regions. But here is the problem. Presidential events, let alone permanent facilities such as state lodges, do not come cheap. From security to general staff, maintenance and utilities, it takes millions of taxpayer shillings to keep these state lodges running. Yet, as is humanly the case, no president can ever find simultaneous or cost-effective use of all the 11 state lodges and 3 state houses. Even if they were to host delegations of ethnic Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs on a daily basis, the 3 members of the tripartite presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina will still struggle to make optimal use of Kenya's sprawling presidential facilities. And in a country wallowing in foreign debt, and a nation whose critical sectors such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure are in dire conditions, this state lodges construction craze can no longer be justified. Invoking constitutional principles of advancing devolution, promoting regional equity, and the likes is really insincere. Not even the Kenyan ancient logic of moving the presidency closer to the people can wash this. The United States, a vast country and a superpower, wealthy, has only 3 official residences for the president. The White House in Washington, D.C. as the primary residence, Camp David in Maryland as a countryside retreat, and Blair House in Washington, D.C. for the president's guests. There are no little White Houses or federal lodges dotting its 50 states for the president's regional visits. The bottom line is, it will always be difficult to validate this torrent of state lodges in Kenya. No president, past, current, or future, would ever really find justifiable round-the-year use of all those person-specific national Airbnbs, or rather, state lodges.
Hii mambo na kujenga kila wakati, wanajenga nini? You see, Kaikai and then Yvon Okwaras was talking about the issue of Singapore, comparing Kenya to Singapore.
Kenya will be the next Singapore. Only tough decisions will get us to the Singapore League. If our leaders worked as hard as our citizens, would be the Singapore of Africa. If Singapore made it to the first world, we too can make it. We've heard these lines time and again from our leaders. Apparently, they want Kenya to be like Singapore. Okay then, let's compare. First, the hard numbers. In 2024, Kenya's GDP per capita was about $2,206. Singapore's was roughly $88,500. That's around 40 times higher. Population? Kenya is a nation of 53 to 54 million. Singapore is just over 6 million. Size didn't save us, but smallness didn't limit them. On debt, we strain to service our loans. But while Singapore owes much more on paper, they hold state assets and savings to back it up. How about income from work? Well, the typical full-time worker in Singapore took home a median of about $5,500 a month in 2024. That's about 710,000 Kenya shillings. Here in Kenya, official data shows average earnings are 10 times less, at about 74,000 shillings a month, with entry-level jobs being at an average 30,000 a month. Many more Kenyans are still waiting for their first payslip. How about education and skills? Singapore topped the latest PISA rankings. That's a global assessment of 15-year-olds from different countries to gauge their knowledge and understanding of math, science, and reading. Kenya is not even ranked by PISA. So just how did Singapore do it? Well, they certainly didn't just talk their way into prosperity. They built clean, predictable institutions. Let me explain. Fiscal honesty before fiscal heroics. A credible medium-term plan that matches revenue to realistic spending. Ring-fencing development outlays from the daily political seasons. They also formulated industrial policy that picks problems, not pet projects. That picks the bottlenecks such as power costs, logistics, port clearance, standards, and removes them with deadlines. They basically make exports boringly reliable. They have schools that teach for the economy we actually want. Formal jobs, not formal slogans. They cut the costs of formality. That's e-registration, one-stop tax and compliance. They reward farms that grow payrolls, exports and training hours, not those that can afford the longest motorcades. And on anti-corruption, that is done administratively, not acrimoniously. Digital tenders by default, public contracts and beneficial ownership online. Penalties that arrive swiftly enough to deter the next deal. Singapore has cities that cut friction, minutes saved from port to factory to airport. If a permit takes weeks here in Kenya, it takes just hours there. And now allow me permission to be blunt. None of what they have done was developed by speeches. You see, we can't talk our way to progress. We have to work through it. If words alone were enough, we've talked much more than Singapore ever has. So what's the point of departure? Singapore chose competence over clientelism, measurement over megalomania, and discipline over drama. It chose to count, then to do. We choose too often to announce. Economies do not transform by rhetoric. They transform when the boring things get done, on time, on budget, without kickbacks, so often that it becomes culture. So, while we endlessly promise, proclaim, predict, Singapore chose consistency, competence, and consequence, while we choose, too often, announcements. So I hope we can settle this debate once and for all. No, Kenya is not like Singapore.
They call them benchmarking trips. Delegations of our leaders flying across the world, business class of course, to learn how others do it. And indeed, when they land, they see the order, the safety, the trains gliding by, the airports running like clockwork. They attend international conferences, high-level meetings, glamorous panels. They rub shoulders with world leaders and sit in air-conditioned halls, nodding to ideas of equality, governance, climate action, and economic growth. They even stroll down foreign streets without a single bodyguard. They see cities that, though not perfect, actually work. But the question is, what do they bring back? Could they take a casual walk along Tomboya Street without security? Or is it safer to admire pedestrian freedom only in Europe or Asia? When they ride trams abroad, do they ever wish Kenyans had a reliable train system here? Or are they content to come back, land at JKIA, and jump into motorcades that block traffic for everyone else and call it a day? We hear them often on the global stage. They speak passionately about equality, about Africa's right to a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. They call for fairness and recognition. Noble ambitions, no doubt. But shouldn't equality begin at home? Equality in safety on our streets, equality in reliable services like functioning hospitals and education institutions, equality in the dignity of public infrastructure that actually works for all citizens. If you want a seat in New York, first earn your seat here in Nairobi. Build the infrastructure, run efficient systems, give citizens the dignity of working public services. We don't need another international deal to have a proper airport or working roads. We just need leaders inspired enough to bring home what they admire abroad. And we don't need to fly out for yet another conference to know that our citizens deserve a functioning transport system. These are things we can and should do for ourselves. Yes, we can admire the world, but what matters is building a Kenya that works, where leaders don't need to travel thousands of miles to experience order, safety, and dignity. A Kenya where what we see abroad is what they live and deliver right here at home. Until then, benchmarking remains a little more than sightseeing at the taxpayer's expense. That is my memo.
They tell us that they want to make Kenya the Singapore of Africa. Is it really possible? Let me just ask. Is it really possible to make Kenya the Singapore of Africa if the leaders themselves put their interest first? If leaders cannot deny themselves and work for us, then do you really think it's possible to make Kenya the Singapore of Africa?
For the last 1 week, the country has known no peace as political leaders competed over who could shout the loudest about Linda Mama versus Linda Jamii. Fascinating how every politician who found a live microphone rushed to tell their version of the truth, most of it less about healthcare, more about scoring points against former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And when darkness fell, the same politicians sped home, not to miss the evening bulletin, eager to watch how grand their performance had looked in our increasingly reactive political culture. But now the week is over. Then what? Behind the sound bites are real lives. Millions of Kenyans remain without medical insurance. Hundreds of thousands depend solely on their nearest health facility, and in most cases, near is not near. Over 3 million citizens are now over 60, many with no predictable income, battling chronic illnesses that demand continuous care. Meanwhile, our health system suffers the shortage of medical specialists. Those available are too costly for ordinary families. Now, until mid-2024, poor mothers could still count on Linda Mama for free deliveries, including by cesarean section when needed. The program had its flaws: facilities underfunded, reimbursements delayed. Yet, if the government reports were to be trusted, at least 1 million mothers benefited each year. Maternal deaths reduced, infant mortality declined, outcomes improved. And now the government points to the Primary Healthcare Fund, which also finances free maternal care at some level. But facilities complain of insufficient funding, delayed disbursements. Medics question where shift kicks in at the lower levels of care, if at all. Meanwhile, mothers are being detained for unpaid hospital bills, the very problem Linda Mama was designed to address. This is the reality politicians ignore when they grab the microphone. The essence of public policy is to serve the people. When serving leaders spend more time competing with retired leaders, what do you call that? Imagine Form 4 candidates this October calling a press conference during one of their KCSE breaks to mock last year's candidates for failing chemistry. And as you imagine that, Kenyans are not asking which scheme has the better name. They want a health system that works, where healthcare workers are present, diagnosis is accurate, prescriptions correct, medicine available, outcomes favorable, all at a predictable and affordable cost. As we speak, many county governments have certain unresolved grievances with their doctors, nurses, clinical officers, laboratory technologists, and more. Patients queue in uncertainty as the politicians play. No Kenyan patient has asked what's better between Linda Mama and Linda Jamii. All they want is to get well. Perhaps it's time leaders took more breaks from the game of politics to fix the pressing challenges that threaten the lives of Kenyans more than they do to political careers.
I want you to listen to them from the beginning up to the end, and then after listening to them, please don't forget to drop me a comment at the comment section telling me what you think and where you are watching this video from. One thing I know and I believe as I wind up is that William Samoei Ruto sometimes, you know, saa zingine William Ruto uketi chini anajiuliza kwamba what can I really do to these guys? What can I really do to these citizen journalists? Because hao watu wameenda sana. But there is nothing he can do. There is nothing, completely nothing he can do. Whether he tries to talk to SK Macharia, you know, to fire them, it is impossible. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when you try to look at somebody like Sam Gituku, when you try to look at Jamila, when you try to look at Kaikai, when you try to look at Yvon Okwaras, where those guys and Bonyo, those guys are the Nikama Aundo, those are the brand of citizen. No, to answer to. Do you think it's possible to fire Yvon Okwaras? Just a question. You tell me that at the comment section. Do you really think it's possible to fire Yvon Okwaras? Do you really think it's possible to fire Sam Gituku? Linus Kaikai? Jamila? Somebody like Trevor Mbija? Somebody like Abdi Kadir? So you see, Citizen is full of people that it's impossible to fire them.
Look, Yvon, there's only one motivation for the opposition to remain united. They all say one term. And they've made that really, really clear. And then the how also forces them to sit in the same room. And that is Article 138 of the Constitution of Kenya, 2010. which in sabbatical 4 requires that a winning presidential candidate must garner at least half, more than half of the more than half of the votes cast. And they must also get at least 25% of more than half of the counties. Now, political egos are really big. They are like big boulders. And when you see this team, had it not been for 138, they could not fit in one room because of the political egos. You can already see the silent wars between them because of the huge egos. But then at some point, they have to do the math around 138. The math around 138 is then what makes regional politics relevant, which is why you see, and I agree, Kanun, when you talk about the fight between Rigathi Gachagua and Uhuru Kenyatta, because there's a huge basket there, unfortunately, tribes are actually like commodities in this country. So you count them as like pebbles. And I covered elections in the Gambia where they were voting with pebbles. That's how you see it. You have 6-7 million pebbles from this region, which is why the fight between the silent war between Uhuru Kenyatta and Rigathi Gachagua. All in all, this will be a very interesting relationship to watch going forward. For one reason, the battle for regional supremacy, especially in Mount Kenya, is usually a very, very epic one. So epic that it actually cost the opposition the election of 1992. There were two strong candidates from Mount Kenya region. In former President Mwai Kibaki, who was then the leader of DP party, and in former transport minister, former sports minister, former party leader of Ford Asili, Kenneth Stanley Njindo Matiba, who was very, very popular, having rebelled against his former boss, President Moi. And they both went to the ballot purely because of egos that they had. If you combine the votes of Matiba and Mwai Kibaki, they were sufficient to send President Moi home. Those days we didn't have the 50+1 rule, and it was a simple majority. The joined opposition, which also included Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and there were about 8 candidates that time, including John Harun Mwau. They all joined.
Chibule
Watsuma was there as well. Yeah. Mukaru Nganga was there. Yeah. It was a big list. They joined. The total number of votes from the opposition was actually 3 times more than what President Moi had. Now there is a constitutional requirement that whoever is elected president must cross the half+1 mark. And that's the only reason these politicians will work together. So the one thing that we know about Mount Kenya politics, which now has 2 players in Uhuru Kenyatta and Rigathi Gachagua, is the knives are long. And Uhuru Kenyatta is actually walking with one in his back. He went to Mount Kenya in the last election to support Raila Odinga. And Rigathi Gachagua actually won that contest and stuck the knife right at the back of Uhuru Kenyatta. And that's way before the ship incident in the ranch. And this is what happens in this regional politics. I think it's also going to be expanded to look at other candidates like Fred Matiang'i, who appears to enjoy the outright support of the Kisii region, and in a region where another candidate emerged today, declaring that he's gotten a party. As former Chief Justice David Maraga, who is also running. So we're going to see, again, in that region, who has the numbers. Because, like I said, votes are mere pebbles in this country. First of all, gather them regionally before you convert them to a national vote. But is something going to change? Jamila, you're talking about the registration of voters and all that. It's time will tell. There have been epic political developments in the last 2 years in this country, right from June last year to now. We can't just assume that it'll be the usual way of doing things. So there must be room for what we don't know.